how I got this angry about all these things.
I don't know how I got this angry about all these things. That's every YouTube comment section. All right, we've all been very good boys and girls, and that means that it's time for another reaction video. We're going to do this Anne Rice interview with Charlie Rose from 1995. And right off the top, I just got to say, I love Anne's looks. Anne's fashion has always been uniquely her, absolutely authentic to what she's feeling in the time, and like it never mattered what the consensus from, you know, the viewers or fans was going to be about her fashion. She was doing it for her.
Anne Rice is the author of 16 books, including Interview with a Vampire. Her hugely popular tales explore the tantalizing and erotic world of the supernatural. She's just written the 5th book in her series, The Vampire Chronicles, and Memnoch the Devil.
Oh, I'm so excited that this interview is about Memnoch. So Memnoch was the first novel in the Vampire Chronicles that I got to be there for day one. I waited I waited for my mom to take me to Sam's Club. We bought it at Sam's Club because I got it for like, I don't know, something insane, like $14 for the hardcover or something like that. But I got it day one.
The dashingly cruel vampire Lestat returns, but surrenders the spotlight to Memnoch, the fallen angel. I'm very pleased to have Anne Rice back at this table.
Oh, we know you're pleased, Charlie.
Thank you.
You dirty dog, you.
Oh, New Orleans is great right now. Very hot and very beautiful.
Yeah.
New Orleans is always hot. It's always beautiful. Yeah, 2 weeks in December. It's not hot. It's just wet.
Let me talk about this a little bit because
Sure.
you have to go to, I want to get a lot of stuff in. You say that this was a very, very hard book for you to write.
It was an agony. Yeah.
Why?
Well, you know, a mystical experience is something that usually comes to you. But writing a book like this is sort of like courting a mystical experience, you know. Really, I really was...
Reading Memnoch the Devil is sort of like courting a mystical experience too, if we're honest with ourselves. So just a refresher in case she doesn't get to it, and I'm sure she's going to talk about it at some point because Charlie likes to talk about Catholicism and religious trauma. Anne has gone in and out of the Catholic Church her entire life, or did go in and out of the Catholic Church her entire life. Obviously, always raised as a devout Catholic and everything, but then she sort of like met secularism and was like, oh, well, of course. But then she went back into the faith at different times. That she rebelled against the Catholic Church because of the pedophilia scandal and everything. So it was a complicated history with her, and Memnoch honestly is her, I think, warring out a lot of that on the page.
Trying to get into, I wouldn't want to say the mind of God, that's disrespectful, but I was trying to understand how there can be evil and suffering in the world, how that can happen. I was trying to see the point of view of the devil, see the point of view of God, see the point of view of man in relation to that. Yeah. And so I was going as far as I could toward having a revelation as one can go. The revelation didn't, you know, comes from outside. That's something else. But I put myself through it. It was like going on a retreat for a month and then emerging.
Now, how do you...
I put myself through it. I love that, man. I feel like here's one way I know, and it's come up already in some of our other coverage. We are the Articulate Coven, by the way. We've got a great podcast you can check out where we cover everything Anne Rice, the books, the movies, the TV series, of course, from AMC and AMC Plus, the Immortal universe. That's our main game there. But Anne put herself through it all through her work. But one way she could have helped is by using an editor. After Queen of the Damned, basically she was never edited again. Her editor was there as a mentor figure and kind of like a confidant and a support system and an advocate for her to the publisher, et cetera, et cetera. But everything that got printed after that was all Anne.
You do that. I mean, how do you go on this retreat and emerge? How do you make these explorations to sort of decide what it is that's tantalizing and what it is that you want to put into your story?
Well, I think about it for a long time. I've wanted to do this novel for a long time, and I tried to make this novel work with just a mortal man going to heaven and hell with Memnoch and so forth. It didn't work, but as soon as I put Lestat in the novel, it worked perfectly.
It's interesting because later she does put a regular man in with these angels and demons and God and the devil and everything with her Angel Time series, right?
Lestat, he also is the narrator.
Yes, he's the narrator.
You know, why not have someone else narrate it? Why have
well,
him?
Lestat's narrated. The Tale of the Body Thief, and pretty much most of the books, the Vampire Chronicles, he's the narrator.
Is this the end of the Vampire
I think
Chronicles?
it is. I think it is. I wrote this last year in '94, and then this year I went back over the proofs a year later, which is a strange experience, not to see a book for a year and then suddenly to read it. And when I finished, I was really, really high about the whole thing.
She was high about the whole thing. She wasn't really high when she finished. That's not what she was saying, guys.
And he walked off, I swear. He just said, "This is all I have to tell you.
Yeah.
You've done enough with me." And he walked
speaks to
off.
you?
Oh, yeah, sort of, right.
I mean, he's like a friend. He's like what?
Oh, he's not like a friend.
I love that Charlie every time is surprised. Watch it. I guarantee you this comes up in every one of the interviews. He speaks to you. He's always acts surprised by that. He knows that. He knows that this is the way that she particularly the way that she relates to Lestat. But Anne said that this was true of some of the other characters and books that she's written as well. The character shows up and sort of speaks, and she just translates, dictate, writes it down. Transcribes, I guess, is the word that I'm looking for there. Anyway, he's not a friend. What is he, Anne?
He's like the bad part of me.
Oh, he's the bad part of you.
I think so, or the part of me that resolves things instead of just worrying about them.
Yeah.
Takes action no matter what.
Okay, so it's interesting. He's the bad part of me is how she describes him here. Literally in the last interview with Charlie in '93, she described him as the man she wishes that she was.
Are his journeys some sense of an exploration? You're talking about putting your mind into God, trying to determine the difference in good and evil and Satan and God and fallen angels and all of that. Is it an effort for you to undergo, when you write these, some personal exploration of these questions?
Oh, absolutely. I was obsessed. I had been reading the Bible. I've been reading Scripture. I've been reading the apocryphal texts, the ones that were kicked out.
I really like it when she reads the apocryphal text. She, in lots of Facebook posts and Facebook Live videos, I remember where she would talk, at length about the different, like the Book of Enoch and some of her thoughts on the Book of Enoch. There's some good shit in there, and it's definitely where she got some inspiration from Memnoch.
Canonical version.
Yeah.
I've been reading and reading and reading, and I'm fascinated by this story of the idea of this fallen angel, and I wanted to get into it and explore it. In the novel, I wanted to put Lestat right there. I say, why? I've always been bothered by the fact that that an angel would be so stupid as to fall, like Satan did, and then that he wouldn't change over all the centuries, that he wouldn't learn anything.
Okay. I was raised very fundamentalist, not Catholic, but fundamentalist Baptist, Free Will Baptist. And this idea, the very idea of the origin of evil, it still sort of bothers me. Like the very idea that you could be in the presence of God. You could know for a fact that he's real and that all of the things that he's done, the creation of the universe, et cetera, and you could be like, "Oh, I could have done it better." It's what's most interesting about that, though, is that Memnoch sort of lays out a good case for the devil. I mean, in this case, anyway. One more thing that I'll just say here because I'm going to forget it if I don't say it later. If you've read Memnoch the Devil, but you haven't read the last trilogy, the Prince Lestat trilogy, there's not, I wouldn't say like a continuation of that story. But there are certain things that are resolved or brought up again or referenced, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, there's something for you there in the Prince Lestat trilogy if Memnoch's one of your favorite books.
So that's, I took the concept that he was, in fact, a learning and thinking being, as well, a great angel, as well as the devil. And so I tried to, I guess I took everything I'd always been taught about all of them, and I really went into, exploring it fictionally. I mean, it was very, very, very much a journey to hell for me. I mean, they go to hell. Well, yeah, they go to hell in the book, and
well,
I
they go
went
to heaven
with them.
too. I mean, they go back and forth.
Yes, that was wonderful. That's why I did that first, But it really tore me up. But in a sense, this is what I care about. I don't care about anything else except these questions. I really don't.
It's all our books are about. It's literally all our books are about. What is good? What is evil? What's our purpose? Where did we come from? Where are we going? What does, companionship and commitment mean in a endless universe?
Like who is God and what is God
Yeah, or
and what's
why
good
does
and what's evil.
exactly. What is
and immortality. There seems to be some giant search on your part to find immortality.
Well, you know what it is. It's not so much literal immortality. I mean, the vampires have always been symbols. It's me seeking after the surety of immortality that I had when I was a Catholic child. And I keep reading.
The certainty of it.
Yeah, I keep reading, right. I keep reading.
Wait, that speaks to a former fundamentalist, right? Like the certainty. You know, it's funny. I've got a friend who served in the Army right after 9/11. He volunteered and went in, and he was in for like 4 or 5 years. And he's told me on several occasions that since he's been back, there's this like ache almost. When in the Army, he was purposeful. He knew exactly what he was supposed to do every day. He knew exactly where he fit in the machine as his, little cog in the machine. And he knew the purpose of the machine, you know? So everything made sense. It was easy. And well, not easy because it was hard day to day, but the big questions were solved for him already. That's absolutely true when you're a fundamentalist, when you buy into it, when you believe it. And when you leave that fundamentalism or you leave the safe structure of that, military structure, the rest of your life is just like, where's that certainty?
These near-death experiences, they come out every week. We have a new book of people who have seen the light. But these are fascinating
stories. Even Harvard professors now.
Yes, I mean, but these are fascinating stories by these people of what they've seen, and I'm intrigued. I think atheism is kind of cocky. It seems shallow to me now. It seems brittle.
Yeah,
like
but in the end, as soon as you say that, in the end here, there is no certainty.
Well,
in the end, there's no answer.
Yeah, we're always left with that doubt.
Yeah, why? I mean, why couldn't you come to some conclusion here?
Oh, no, I couldn't.
Why? Because you don't know? Or
no, because I don't think God and the devil ever let us come to a conclusion.
Yeah, it is an eternal battle between the two of them.
After another, yeah. I mean, it can be read too many ways. I mean, goodness, I mean, God, I was going through the...
Man, one of my favorite parts of Memnoch is I think this is in Memnoch. It might actually come in Tale of the Body Thief now that I think about it. But I'm pretty sure that it's David who has heard the conversation a few times in his life, seemingly the conversation between God and the devil. It's one of my favorite things ever. I always imagined, like you'd sit in a cafe or you'd be in a mall, food court or something, and I'd see two men sitting together, and I'd think, maybe it's God and the devil having a conversation about the universe.
The books of the Torah. I mean, the incredible violence, the strange things that are said in Isaiah. I'm just enthralled with all that, and I'm also enthralled, as everybody else is, with what we do with evil in the world. Like we have been ashamed for. Since the Second World War, that we did not do something to stop the extermination of the Jews in Germany, and yet now we are watching the extermination of peoples in several different countries. And every time our president really tries to do something about it, Americans jump up and say, well, we don't want...
Don't send American men and women.
We didn't put them in the army to fight, Yeah. And I mean, I understand that, I really do, but I can't help but believe that we should have some sort of foreign legion.
So this was problems in Eastern Europe, honestly. Problems with the Soviet Union, former Soviet Union countries falling apart. I can't remember exactly. I think maybe it was Chechnya. I can't remember. But this was the Clinton presidency, and boy, Anne was big on Bill Clinton.
For volunteer people who do want to go save people from starving.
Well, interesting you say that. In fact, there's a proposal at the UN. In fact, some people at the UN would like to see the UN have a standing army of a kind that would go sort of a rapid deployment force. It would be able to go from region to region, country to country, where there is an emergency of a kind of genocide taking place.
That is exactly it. We're watching genocide. We know it's happening in Iraq with the Kurds, and we know it's happening in different countries.
Bosnia, it's happening.
Yeah, and it's happening in Africa.
It has happened in Cambodia, and it's happened in Africa.
Right, and all this trouble...
Bosnia, Herzegovina. Yeah.
Troubles me very much. So this is my way of writing about it. I mean, that's always been the trick with me, if it's a trick, is that I can take supernatural characters, like the vampires, and write about the things I really care about with them.
But why couldn't you do it with human characters?
Oh, I just don't feel any desire to. I tried this book with a human hero. There was too much the human hero would have to.
I mean, Anne's written books with primarily human characters. She wrote a few books out of the supernatural realm, but I'm with her. There's no reason not to use the heightened circumstances and plot lines and character traits to tell this very human, very direct, very relatable story that is completely universal.
Overcome the initial shock of seeing God and the devil. So I needed an experienced spiritual wanderer like Lestat, who already had almost the powers of an angel. And it said the book just worked. It was as if he was right at my shoulder, and he said, "I told you I was the person to put in this book." You know.
Do you see Tom Cruise now?
First of all, I told you I was the person to put in this book. I love the idea of Lestat, standing over Anne's shoulder and correcting her on manuscripts that she hasn't made part of the Vampire Chronicles yet. And this question from Charlie.
Do you see Tom Cruise now in your mind's eye when you think
No,
of Lestat?
I see my Lestat, but I loved Tom Cruise's performance. Yeah, I really did. And I think he was absolutely wonderful in the movie. More wonderful, perhaps, the more you watch the movie, the more wonderful his performance becomes.
Let's take a refresher. The last time that we saw Anne on Charlie Rose from '93, she was very surprised, shocked by Tom Cruise as Lestat.
How did the movie do?
The movie did spectacularly
David
well.
Geffen came away very
Oh, yeah,
even
it
richer.
made $200 million or something. Warner Brothers was absolutely floored. I mean, nobody expected an R-rated movie to make millions and millions and millions.
And
I think David gave all his money to AIDS.
From this film?
Yeah, from that film.
I mean, obviously to AIDS relief is what she meant there, but I believe that is true. And it was a very successful movie, honestly. Even with the marketing budget that they added into it, it was a very successful movie, which is all the more shocking why they never made a true sequel to it. We waited, almost 10 years, and then we got Queen of the Damned, which was...
Are you, in Memnoch the Devil, the Vampire Chronicles, are you, in a sense, does your audience, are they allow you to have a vampire suck the blood of Jesus?
Well, I'll tell you, last night I signed at Barnes & Noble from 5:30 to 11:30, and many, many, many people had read the book, and not a single one seemed in any way shocked. They saw it as a solid final adventure for Lestat, and they understood it in the way that I meant it.
Well, okay, couple things. Yes, Memnoch is the one where Lestat drinks from Jesus Christ, like on the road to Calvary. It's a crazy scene. It is a crazy scene. It wasn't shocking to me in the book either. I mean, and I don't know, whatever I was when it came out in 95, I guess I was 14 maybe. But yeah, it wasn't that in the context of the book. It's not as crazy as it sounds out loud. I don't know what to tell you.
And how did you mean it?
With moral seriousness, with respect. I mean, I was a little girl.
The body of Christ?
Absolutely. I was a little girl who sat in church on Good Friday and meditated on the wounds.
Right.
Yeah, that's the other thing you got to remember. Anne had spent her whole life eating, in her mind, the literal body of Christ, drinking the literal blood of Christ. She was a old school Catholic. She believes in the transubstantiation.
And I put Lestat in the company of God incarnate, as he calls him throughout, and that seemed to me to be absolutely inevitable, that would happen, that Christ would invite him to drink the blood. I mean, I grew up going to Mass every morning to drink that blood in a different form, but we believed absolutely that it was the blood of Christ. So, this is very serious to me. I don't make fun of religion. I'm not flippant. This is not satirical.
And this is where I'll tell you the anecdote that somewhere in between Queen of the Damned and Tale of the Body Thief, I speculated errantly in my own little 13-year-old mind on whether or not God was in fact a vampire. Or at least Jesus had been.
Did you leave the Catholic Church?
Yes, I left at 18.
Yeah, at 18, and you have not been back?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Might you ever? I mean, is all of this...
So, okay, at this point, she hadn't returned to the faith yet. We know she wrote a couple of Jesus books. She wrote the angel books. She left the vampires completely for a while because she had returned to the faith. And then she started writing the vampires again anyway, even while she was practicing the faith. Then she left the faith again. Like I say, it's very complicated.
Going to somehow cause you to have some kind of religious experience of your own so that you'll become closer to a church?
I don't think so, but I am obsessed with the idea of goodness and kindness and how we live, how we make an ethical world today. I'm obsessed with this, and the latest book I've done is about the same thing.
What's it about?
It's called Servant of the Bones, and it's about an ancient Hebrew ghost who was made to do evil and just refuses.
Oh, I love Servant of the Bones too. I really want to reread it. I'm a little worried that some of it might be problematic and sort of like appropriation, but I at the time I was so excited about it. I loved it every bit as much as I love The Mummy, which was honestly I like The Mummy even more than the Mayfair books.
What do you think the success of your books is about? I mean, I know that you have spoken to the notion of the critical success of them and how you feel about what critics say, and we'll get to that in a moment. But obviously America, many, many people love what you say. I mean, is it because you are somehow a way for them to deal with these themes that are interesting in terms of sexuality and immortality and death and all of that?
That's what they indicate to me. That's what they tell me. They tell me that the books sweep them off their feet, that that's what they want, that the books really matter to them. I don't. Sometimes I'm baffled because it was such a weird path to take for an author. I was so stubborn. I was so...
We talked about in the episode on the 93 interview with Charlie Rose, like she sort of failed with the Interview with the Vampire and then wrote 2 historical novels, at least 2, Feast for All Saints and Cry to Heaven. And then she went back to supernatural stuff when those didn't work either.
You know, as David Geffen says, now don't be stubborn, Anne, you know, when we're talking about a new script. But I mean,
A new script for...
Oh, I did a script for The Witching Hour and sent it to him. Do you know anyone who would like to direct and produce it? It's at Warner Brothers. It's been sitting there for weeks.
It took so long for the Mayfairs to come, and now they're on AMC, and they are not, well, they're not, it's not a great adaptation.
Okay, call him up.
I think you just got the message out.
Yeah, right. But,
by the way, Warner Brothers, Anne Rice is not quite happy with the fact that you haven't figured out what to do with her script.
Well, after saying for years that I would never break bread with them again or be in the same room with them, then David persuaded my buddy persuaded me from the heart to do The Witching Hour and
now,
last
how
year
does
as
he
a script.
do this?
He calls
power
and this
persuasion
charming
that he
voice
has.
and says, "Anne, I want you to write the script for The Witching Hour." And I said, "You're kidding me."
Never,
you
David.
are asking me. No, that's right. He said, "Oh, come on, you really should do it." Blah blah blah.
Yeah, and you did it.
I think one of the reasons why Anne's works weren't adapted more often is because she was very precious with them, and she really did fight for control and for authority and for involvement. We've speculated on the podcast that one of the reasons why she and Christopher fell out with AMC Productions was because the expectation when they were at Hulu was that Christopher was going to be in the writing room, like one of the primary, movers and shakers on the show on an episode-to-episode basis. Christopher had written a pilot script, for instance, called Wolf Killer, which starts with Lestat's origin. And they were going to go out from there for the rest of the Vampire Chronicles and tell all the stories, including Interview, but they were going to do it from Lestat forward. I don't know. I continue to think that we got the best version of this adaptation that we were ever going to get with AMC. I don't think the Hulu one would have been as good. I know the Hulu one wouldn't have had Sam Reed, and that alone would have been a downgrade to me. So, I think sometimes Anne got in her own way as far as adaptation goes.
Yeah, after about 10 calls. I finally did.
Now, do you control all of these? You can determine, is this going to be made into a film? It's a little bit hard
He
for this.
He controls that because Lestat is in that, and he controls all the novels that involve Lestat. That was
He owns
contractually.
Lestat. David Geffen owns Lestat.
He'd have to he'd have to pay money, but he could automatically acquire it.
Well, did he pay you well?
I think that's a tough question.
I didn't know that fact, or I had forgotten it anyway, that Geffen had control of the Lestat character at that point, or an option on the Lestat character at that point. Boy, David, why didn't we get another one sooner?
Yeah, I was happy enough with the deal on The Witching Hour and Lasher. On Interview with the Vampire, that I regarded as really a gift to him. He feels it was a horribly expensive price. I feel to give him the control of all these books for that amount was really a gift.
But there's no doubt that this is the end of the Vampire Chronicles for you.
For me, it is.
Bum, bum, bum. It wasn't. It wasn't nearly the end of the Vampire Chronicles. Like, she restarted it, like, at least twice after this, maybe really 3 times.
Yeah, because it's all a spiritual quest. From the
Right.
first opening line, I see, you said the vampire, you know.
Right.
And to me, it all came together with this. This was the final, you know, Lestat tried everything, and finally God and the devil, you know, came down and sort of called his bluff.
That is the face that I make when my wife walks into the bedroom where I'm shooting a video fully nude. She got out of the shower and I saw her out of the corner of my eye and I was like, oh, time to pause that video. So here we go. Let's finish up with what Anne has to say. All right, let's find out more about Memnoch from Charlie Rose.
Tell me about Memnoch. I mean, how you see Memnoch.
Well, I'm very intrigued with how the devil could fall,
Yeah.
all the myths about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the myths, and this really is not, I don't think, in Scripture, this is a myth, is that Lucifer foresaw the incarnation of Christ and said, I refuse to bow down to a creature who is lesser than me. Well, I always thought that was rather dumb.
It's interesting because, I mean, that's not what Memnoch does, but in some ways it sort of is.
You know, really stupid, you know. And I wanted to try to see what the devil's true position could be in opposition to God. And I developed an adversary to
Yeah.
God, but an adversary who
I mean,
cares
part
passionately.
of this book is making the argument against God's moral failings. Yes?
The God we're
Yes?
taught. Exactly, the God we're taught about, the God who's supposed
I love Anne's qualifiers here. I'm not impugning God. I'm impugning the God that you imagine to be real.
supposedly, you know, is says everything is okay if we, you know.
It's an indictment of God.
It's an indictment of a concept of God. It's not an indictment of the concept of God that these people are seeing who have near-death experiences. It's not at all an indictment of that concept of God.
Well, that
but
God
it is an indictment.
That's just a nice little tunnel with a white
Oh,
light.
oh, but listen, more and more people are seeing this and experiencing this life review and this.
And you believe in it, that in fact
I'm
people
very
with near-death
intrigued.
experiences...
I'm very intrigued by it. I collect everything.
She was intrigued until the very end of her life with near-death experiences. Honestly, she talked about it a lot online.
You know, from the most simply written baby talk book to the most scholarly study of recently there was one by a Yale student, a Yale professor, called The Case for Heaven, and it's a very intelligently written book. But what fascinates me is first-person accounts of all these different people.
This is clearly going to be a book for you. Near-death experiences. Somehow
Well,
all this is going to go into your brain.
They're in there already.
And she kept writing about these sorts of things too in different ways. I think she continued. It was never a full book, but I'm sure that impacts her Angel series to some degree. You know, yes, it was all through her writing.
I mean, a lot of it, yeah. The version of heaven in there comes from many, many different sources and descriptions of heaven. Yeah. But it was, you know, in a way, it was like saying, okay, let's take everything I was taught, and suppose it's true. Well, what do they really say to each other? How do the arguments start? You know, who's right, who's wrong? How does somebody
This could be a great
God?
debate for television. Just take two. You don't need the whole book. I mean, you could read the book, but you could do a great debate about the nature of God between the devil and God, in a sense.
Yeah, Charlie, let's just turn this novel that's already sold a few million copies into a into a TV special.
Taking, you know, almost pro and con.
Wasn't there a play in the late 50s, JB by Archibald MacLeish?
Yeah, there was, in fact, exactly.
I remember seeing that play in
Pulitzer
college.
Prize winner for both prose and poetry.
And I remember seeing that. I was very young. I barely remember the content.
I don't know of that play. I got to look that up now.
So I'd like to go back
What
and
would
see
be
it.
the hardest thing for you to do now? I mean, what is a terribly difficult road for Anne Rice to cross at this stage in her life and her career and her success?
I don't know.
Do you fear any? What do you fear? Because
that's an interesting question. I'm not sure. What I fear?
Yeah.
My own talent vanishing from me, getting away from me, my own intensity, you know, my own mind crumbling.
My father died of Alzheimer's about almost 2.5 years ago now. And dementia is and was and probably always will be my greatest fear. It's not exactly what Anne's saying there, but loss of self, loss of my own cognition, loss of my own ability to perceive and conceive and discuss and consider.
But you haven't seen any diminution of it, have you?
Well, yeah.
You
I mean,
have.
I'm getting older. I'm 53.
Well.
You know, I mean, I used to, I wrote Interview with a Vampire in 5 weeks, and, you know,
Yeah.
now I wrote this in a month. It'd take about a month to write a book. But I worry. I see the signs of age. I see the memory. I'm also very intensely involved in what I'm writing now. There's no fun in this, in a way. You know what I mean? It's thrilling, but there's no fun in going.
Because?
And there's no fun in writing. I've found that to be, there's very little fun in creative processes, honestly. There's fun in the finished creation. There is fun in tapping into what you're good at, but the wrestling of a creative work from yourself is rarely fun. I find it interesting to be reminded that Anne would write a book in about a month. That's insane to me. She'd love NaNoWriMo though, right?
To hell and heaven and seeing
But why
battle
is it no
scenes.
fun? I mean, here you sit there and you create characters and you explore your own intellectual and emotional curiosity. Why is that not fun? I mean,
It's better than fun. It's thrilling.
She looks thrilled, doesn't she?
I suppose it would be like, you know, asking
Yeah.
what's my favorite guy, George Foreman, after a fight. Was that fun?
why is George Foreman your favorite guy?
Anne and I have this in common. George Foreman's probably my favorite boxer of all time. He's not the best boxer, but he is an indomitable personality, and his life story is really interesting. And, you know, so his business investments obviously turned out well for him in the end. He's got like 5, 6 kids. They're all named George. He's my favorite boxer too.
Oh, because he's indomitable. Nobody can beat George. I mean, have you watched him just do
Yeah,
one
he's been here
one
several
guy
times,
after
yeah.
another, and they're always coming on and saying,
course,
"Oh, poor old George, he should retire."
Poor old
and just-
George
the
is
other
having,
guy
you know,
is
what,
just.
you know the problem with poor old George now is he wants Mike Tyson to give him the big battle, and it's not going to happen.
I
He's not
know.
going to get that
And I want that to happen,
$100 million
too.
gate from Mike Tyson.
Right, and it should happen.
Have you
I would have loved to have seen George and Mike fight. Mike would have knocked his head off. It would have been bad.
met George Foreman?
No.
This is a
No.
great conversation.
No.
George Foreman sitting here and Anne Rice sitting here.
I love George
Tell me
Foreman.
about God and tell me about the devil, George.
Right. But to get back to what we were saying, I mean, what he does is tough, but he has to do it, right? It is an enormous
Sure.
drive there
And he'll
to
tell
pit
you that.
himself
He said
against
it is
another
not
man.
easy to get up in the morning
Yeah.
at 4 o'clock and know that you got to hit the road, and especially if you're whatever he is, 48,
yeah.
49.
Yeah,
to do it then.
And some 28-year-old guy is going to come at him, and I
Yeah.
love the way he wears them down. Man, they're dead. They're just out of there by the 5th round or
Yeah.
something, or he's holding them up.
I love Anne as fight fan. I had forgotten this about her if I knew it.
After that, but it's thrilling, it's exciting, it's intense. I don't have any room in my life anymore for anything that isn't.
I don't have any room in my life anymore for things that aren't intense. Woo. Yeah. Okay. I can get with that, Anne. Also, I loved what she said about George. It's tough and it's thrilling, but he has to do it. Yeah. It's like, it's what you do.
Intense, exciting. And that's one of the things.
Yeah,
it
my
seems-
life is too
people-
serious
they-
right now.
yeah.
But it is. I mean, I have a lot of fun. I just had a jazz funeral in New Orleans for my first signing. I got in a coffin, rode in a glass hearse with a jazz band from the Lafayette Cemetery.
Why did
to the
you do
bookstore.
that?
I wanted to.
I had forgotten about the jazz funeral. They rode her through the quarter in a glass coffin.
I just wanted to do it, I mean, over the years I've been asked to do 1,000 things
Whatever
I didn't
Anne
want to
wants,
do.
Anne gets.
Well, I just
Yeah.
decided that I would do what I wanted to do,
How about sexuality?
How about sexual?
What about it,
Well,
Charlie?
we've talked about this before, but I mean, in a sense, in exploring all these kinds of things.
What
I mean,
about
also,
it,
everything
Charlie?
you do
God.
is ripe with.
One of these people is a respected journalist who has a very serious talk show program throughout the 90s. And the other one is a writer of paranormal fiction and erotica, specifically. You tell me which is which. Charlie's such a horn dog.
Eroticism and sexual
Yeah. Well, I do see the world
Connections.
that way. I do see the world that way, very, very much.
in terms of lust and passion and
Well,
sexuality.
you
and-
love. To me, these are all connected by love. I still can't understand how people can think an act of two people touching each other is a crime. Like when Hugh Grant got busted in Los Angeles, I thought, is this a joke? I mean, does this mean there's nobody died tonight in L.A.? No, there was no murder, there was no robbery, peace on earth. Is this the beginning of a new era?
I do. I agree with her. Even as a kid in the 90s, I mean, this is I guess this is probably before Clinton's scandal. Oh, this might be after Clinton's scandal already. I can't remember. But, when the Monica Lewinsky stuff came out, like I was in high school and I was like, is this what we're talking about? Really? Like, who cares what they, I mean, in that case, it was a breach of power and et cetera, et cetera. But like, anyway, our prurient interests are ridiculous in this country. The Puritan nature of our, founding is a problem.
I mean, they go bust this guy in a car because he's with another consenting adult. Come on, I can't get that through my head. So sex and love are intimately connected for me. And as I mentioned
I don't think
to you
this had anything to do with love.
Well,
I think this was sex and business.
Well, at least it was sex and privacy. He needed to be touched. He needed to be in human contact. I don't know. I don't know.
He certainly had the urge, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we can assume.
And paid the price.
Oh, gosh. Well, thank God he's triumphed over all the
therefore, do you think that prostitution should be decriminalized? And
I don't know what to do about prostitution because so much of it involves exploitation of people and putting them on drugs and almost enslaving.
Good call. Sex work is work, but also sex work is used as a big portion of human trafficking, and those two things can and should be separated. It's a difficult question, as many are.
I do have fantasies of going around in a black limousine and killing every visible pimp I can find. Inviting them into the limo, spreading the whole thing with plastic so they don't bleed, and then shooting them.
Well, okay, Ann. I might not have said that on PBS.
Anybody who's been brutal to women and made them prostitutes and hurt them and killed them. I have many fantasies of doing that, but I will never do it.
Well, thank you for never doing it. She had Lestat do it lots, though.
I don't think. Not unless I want to become a prison writer. But I mean, that's how angry it makes me to think of what's done to women in prostitution. But I don't know. I don't know how I got this angry about all these things.
I don't know how I got this angry about all these things. That's every YouTube comment section.
I saw a complete harmony to life and felt a sort of ecstasy a year ago, and then just a passionate concern with all these things. Really.
Any other fantasies we ought to know about?
Oh, no. That I will never
Charlie
do.
turns it right back around.
I can't imagine, but...
What about the sex, though, Ann?
But
Anybody else you want to shoot?
Anybody else I want to shoot? No, but...
She thought about it, though. She thought about it.
But cruelty and genocide make me furious. I mean, absolute unspeakable cruelty. And I think that they should make us angry. I think we're all developing a better sense of what kindness is and what love is, thanks to television. I mean, to tell you the truth.
So this is 100% true. I tell my kids this all the time. We need to have a balance, right? I think a lot of people think, oh, there's like this outrage culture and we're confronted with so much news, like we're angry and mad all the time. Yes, that is true. And there is absolutely a branch of the media that their entire business is to infuriate you because it makes them more money. But also it is true that we live in the best time period in all of human history. Like, fewer people die from disease and bacteria and, simple injuries than ever before. We've got more people on the face of the planet. Like the total population's like average income has increased over, every other time period in history. Technology that allows me to do things like to bring up this interview from, 30 years ago now and share it with you, make my own channel where I can promote the things that I'm interested in and discuss these things and find a community of like-minded individuals. None of that existed 10, 15 years ago. So like, two things can be true. This is an amazing time to live, and also there are terrible things happening in the world, as there always have been, and we're more aware of them now than we ever have before. But I think Ann's right. We have developed more empathy and more love and care for our fellow human beings on average as a population. That's not to say there aren't numbskulls. Watch the comments. I'm sure some will show up.
Absolutely. When we see horrors on TV now, and we can't forget them. And CNN isn't going to let us forget them, no matter what happens. And that's good. That's very, very good. It was not that way during the Second World War.
Yeah, and the only downside of that, the bad side of that is the fact that in many cases there are unspeakable horrors going on that's not on camera, so therefore we don't we're not motivated to do
I
something
know
about it.
And it
That's
tends
one of
to
the-
go in fads.
It
I
tends
mean,
to go where the cameras see it and bring it to
Exactly.
the living room. That's
know.
where we tend to get exercise, and there are many places where we don't. Critical acclaim before we go. Is it, you think, that the supernatural is not considered serious business by literary critics?
Apparently. 'Cause
Boy, it's still true for TV critics, right? Like Interview with the Vampire season 1 was an amazing piece of television, and it got bupkis, got 0 major awards.
it doesn't seem to be in any way connected with the actual effect of the books on the readers or the readership or,
And your response is what?
to ignore the reviews pretty much. I mean, sometimes I learn
Amen.
something.
Ignore
but
that
most
shit.
of the time, just sort of brush them aside. There's no indication of what the book is attempting or accomplishing. I mean, very seldom is there. There is. That's not all the
Yeah,
time. I mean,
right.
sometimes there is, but most of the time, there's nothing of the sort. I think book reviewing in general is kind of like that now. I don't think too many authors would sit here and tell you they were overjoyed with book reviewing. Book reviewing is a mess. It's not like opera reviewing.
There's a big. I don't think opera reviewing is a major industry anymore, Anne.
I mean, the opera guy has to know something about opera.
Yeah.
He can't just go in and say, "Why is everyone screaming in Italian? I don't like it." But a book reviewer can do that to a book. Why are all these people vampires? Who is this?
Boy, okay, that's really true for TV too and movies, right? Like I saw a review of a recent like animated movie, and the guy was going on and on about all the, but it's like clearly this wasn't for you, man. Like this isn't. Obviously, you're not going to enjoy this movie.
Nutcase, and I think we're pretty all unhappy with it. I don't know.
Yeah. Writers are unhappy with critics.
Sure.
Yeah. Anne Rice, Memnoch the Devil, The Vampire Chronicles. She says this is probably the last in that series. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Pleasure.
you for having me back,
As
Charlie. I
always.
loved it.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
God. All right. I love Charlie Rose. I love Anne Rice. I love these interviews. I hope you're enjoying them. Obviously, as we said earlier, this was not the last Vampire Chronicle. There were a whole series. She started, so after this, she ended up doing the New Adventures of the Vampires, where we got Pandora and we got Vittorio the Vampire. But then she went and made Vampire Armand, and she made Blood and Gold, and then she made Blackwood Farm and Blood Canticle. And so there's a whole host of stories in there. This is where the Mayfair crossover comes in around this time with those books. And then of course she launched it again with the Prince Lestat trilogy. So there's plenty of Lestat stories to come. Don't worry about it. And all of the other vampires as well. Speaking of, there's plenty of more coverage here on the channel. If you don't know, we've got a podcast, Articulate Coven. We're the unofficial fan podcast and community for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire Chronicles, the Immortal Universe from AMC and AMC Plus, including Mayfair Witches and the Talamasca show that's going to be coming in 2025. So if you like any of that stuff, click the links below, subscribe to the channel, or find us wherever you listen to podcasts or at articulatecoven.com.